getting people to just really think about like, okay, how does this tie to my purpose? What is the thing I actually want? Because you and I are both aware, like, you can get into this tech thing, you start making a little bit more money. Holy shit, you just woke up and you used to do this for 15 years. Like, is that the thing you really wanted?
Welcome to the Rising Leader Podcast, bringing forth the new wave of rising leadership and helping leaders find purpose, connection, and results. This is your host, founder of Alluviance, Alex Kremer. What is up, y'all? Welcome back to the Rising Leader Podcast. And if this is your first time joining us on the show, welcome. We are so grateful to have you here. I am really excited about today's show. We have an awesome guest on that I've been looking forward to having a conversation with. So first off, Mr. Todd Busler. Todd, what's up, man? It's good to see you on here.
Not much. Good. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You know, Todd, in preparation for this, I definitely listened to a few of the podcasts that you've done, and I saw that you had a surfboard in your background for a few of the podcasts, and I was like, I already know that I'm going to vibe with this guy as a fellow surfer. So it's good to have you on here. But Todd, I'm gonna give a little bit of an introduction on you, some background, and then I'm gonna let you fill in the blanks as well. So
awesome.
You are the co-founder and the CEO of Champify. Champify is a phenomenal company. I've been following you guys' journey for quite a while. Have known it just through being in the sales tech space for a while. But essentially, companies are coming to you when they're struggling with top of the funnel and really understanding where all their advocates are and how they're actually generating new pipeline, how they're protecting their customers. And you just have such a valuable value prop there. And I'll let you kind of get into that in a second. But outside of that, you're the former VP of sales at Heap, where you actually, your track record is pretty awesome. I mean, you're the 5th employee at Heap. You were the first seller. You were the first manager. You were the first VP. You end up leading a whole team of about 25 SDRs and AEs. So you've gone up through the ranks of seller to manager to VP, now up into being a co-founder CEO. So I'm grateful to have you on the show, brother.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I think we have a lot of similar background and a lot of similar learnings and mistakes along the way that got us here. So, and tons of learning in our future.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to start out with just, kind of the first question. The purpose of the show is to bring forth a new wave of rising leadership, right? Help people feel more purpose, connection, and also drive great results. And, you have the journey of starting out as a sales rep. You then moved into a sales manager role. You then moved into the VP of sales role. And now you're founder and CEO. And I think there's a lot of people who are in that individual contributor role who are saying, hey, eventually, I think I want to start my own company. And so I'd actually just love to talk a little bit about like, what was that journey like for you kind of going on your career path? And how did being in sales and being in leadership actually prepare you to be able to fully step into and lead, the great company of Champify now?
There's a lot there. I think I knew I always wanted to start a company, right? Like if you asked me when I was 21, what is it I want to do? I had some people in my network or people that were friends of my father, whatever it is. I've seen people that had businesses and I was like, that's what I want, right? Like that's the thing I want to do. Exactly how I wasn't going to get there, I had no idea. I went to school at Penn. Everyone goes into, not everyone, a lot of people go into finance. I didn't really have interest in that. Everyone has always said, Todd, you should get into sales. I'd always done some type of creative odd jobs growing up in a tourist town that led my way into sales, I think. For me in the beginning, it was like, all right, where can I learn and where can I maximize my, per hour worked earning to set myself up both with the capital and the know-how to be able to start a business at some point, right? So like, that's very much how I approached it. I think as I got pulled deeper and deeper into the tech world, I started to see like, wow, you can make a lot of money as a VP of sales, and look at this CRO thing I'd never heard of. And there was all of these other things I started getting exposed to. But I think in the back of my brain, it was always, what can I learn and how can I earn to set myself up to eventually start, hopefully, a series of businesses throughout my career.
And so essentially what I'm hearing from you is like, I needed to learn how to sell a product so that then once it was time for me to take the big leap into starting my own company, being a CEO, I would know how to do that effectively, either myself or at least train other people how to do it.
Yeah, I think there's levels to it, right? So, Alex, I started out of school. I played football. A guy I played football with was like, "Hey, I work at SAP." I didn't even know what that was, and they're like, "They have this big training program for salespeople. Come in and get involved." I took the job not even knowing it was to be a sales engineer, which I also didn't know what it was at the time. So, I started my career in this training program to be a sales engineer. Kind of first job out, like, okay, this will work. I'm going to start somewhere. I'm really grateful I had that opportunity because I learned how businesses function, right? Like, what is discovery? How do you run demos? What is a P&L? Like, all of this stuff about businesses I just got exposed to, which was great. I think after that, I realized, like, hold on, I want to be the person selling, not the person just doing the demos. I have a ton of respect for sales engineers. I think it's a great place to start. But when I looked at what I actually wanted, it was to be the quarterback, to be the AE, right? And I knew that wasn't going to happen as a 24-year-old kid at SAP, or at least not on the right accounts for years, right? So I started to look at smaller companies where I could go sell. And that led me to Square, super SMB. I went from like super, super enterprise to super SMB. And I'm happy I did that because I got the opportunity to close a ton of deals, right? Just see a lot of transactions, high volume, lower deal cycle. I think a very positive kind of consequence of that move was I was just at a rapidly growing company. So I was there from like 800 people to maybe like 1,500 people in a year. But from the sales org, it was like sub 10 of us to 60 something in a year. So in that, I very unintentionally got exposed to comp plan and territory models and enablement and hiring and all selling multiple products, all of these things that really opened my eyes, like, okay, there's a lot here, right? So I think to answer your question, like, yes, I did get in there to learn how to sell, but I think I very quickly got my eyes open to, it's not just about selling a product. It's how do you develop a team that can go sell a product, and how do you work cross-functionally, and how do you understand enough of what marketing does and success does and support does and product does, so that eventually what I was really building was a skill set to eventually go build and execute on something that was mine.
You know, it's interesting. I coach a lot of different types of tech sales reps, and if I had spoken to them in 2018 and I asked them, you know, what their vision is that they're wanting to move towards, they would say either want to be a VP of sales or a chief revenue officer. And now, as I'm talking to a lot of people and say, what do you want to be moving towards? Many people are saying, I want to start my own thing. But I guess I'm curious, like, if you had to give perspective or advice to that account executive or that up and coming SDR or sales engineer, whatever it might be, what's the skill set that you really need to learn how to master effectively right now to prepare you to be effective when it's time for you to take that jump? What would you say is important to like really dig into?
It's an awesome question. I agree with you. I think a lot of people are thinking that. That was my experience, Alex. Like, I looked around, I had a couple different CROs during my run at Heap, and I eventually was like, I thought I wanted that job, but I actually don't want that job. That's not the thing I want.
That guy looks stressed as hell all the time.
And he just did well and just got fired. You know, there's a lot there. So I think the first thing is just like, look, if you're in your first couple of years of sales, it's completely fine to not know. Like, people ask you in an interview, and I used to tell people, I have no idea in 5 years, right? I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to earn, I'm trying to build my network. And I think that's fine. But at some point, as you're starting to make some bigger jumps, and, you know, when you're a sales rep, it's fine. You commit to a place for a year and a half. But as you get more senior, you know, you're really having longer term commitments. And it's important to think about, like, what is the thing you really want to do? But to answer your question directly, I always think about, if you're in an AE role, you really three jobs. First one, maximize your earnings. Like, you think you're an expert, you're not. Like, it takes a while to get good at this. And when you've been around elite sellers, you understand really how much of professionals they are. And if you think you've hit the wall and there's no more to learn, you're probably wrong, right? You're probably just not surrounded by the right type of elite talent. I think the second thing is, earning, right? So earning and learning, ideally you're doing both of them at the same time, because putting some money in your pocket gives you the ability to go take some chances later, right? And ideally, both those things are coming at the same exact time. If one of them is off, but the other is great, you may want to stick around. Ideally, you can get both. And I think if you work hard and put yourself around the right people, you can get both. The third thing is really just invest in the people you're getting to know. Like, I didn't know this at the time. It wasn't intentional. But if I look back to that first 20 sellers, sellers, AEs, managers, whatever at Square, they're all doing really great, interesting things right now. And I was never like intentionally saying, oh, how do I network with these people? I was just being a good person, trying to help out, get help where needed. And now all these people are one text away, right? So I think it's really those three things that you should be focused on as you're trying to figure out what is the thing I actually want, because you don't know in the beginning. Now you might say, I want this, but you really don't know. And I think maximizing to those three things for some set period of years is the right way to approach it.
Learning, earning, and then meeting other people who are on that journey as
Building your
well.
network, correct.
Building your network. I gotta ask. I mean, you were the first seller at Heap. You know, you worked at Square and SAP. I guess when you think about your sales style, right, and the thing that makes you effective, because yes, you know how to set a powerful frame, how to ask good questions, how to drive a sales process. These are all skill sets necessary to be effective in your role. But there's also like that underlying, like, yeah, but like that person's different and unique, and that's just what makes them great. Do you have anything that you're like, this is what makes me great as a sales professional?
First off, I don't think I'm the best seller. Like, there's so many people that are way better sellers than I am. Like, even the second rep that started at Heap, she's the VP of sales at DBT right now, hottest company as could be. She's way better, right? Like, when we first started, I was like, oh shit, I thought I was doing this well. And I was learning a ton from her, and we started competing and it was great. I think what makes me successful as a seller, not the best, but successful, is curiosity and just high business IQ. Like, I'm always deeply thinking, how does this business make money? What are the true risks of this thing? I deeply try to understand their competitive landscape. And what that allows me to do is ask the right questions that probably most of the time are not related to the product or that I'm selling or the service that we're offering. But it's showing that, okay, this person understands the business. This person thinking about this critically. Therefore, I assume whatever they're selling is going to be able to help us out. So I don't think I'm the best seller I've been around hundreds of people that are way, way better. But I think the curiosity, the high business IQ is something that people, when they have a conversation, they're like, okay, this guy understands the business. And I think that earns the right to get into certain sales cycles.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd almost like want to like add one thing on top there, just like a small reframe to curiosity. It's like there's a genuineness in you. Like, I've known you for a very short amount of time, but I can already tell it's like, oh, this guy's approachable. This guy's not trying to have an agenda or manipulate, but he's actually wanting to just have a really powerful conversation to see if we're a good fit. And it's like, people don't realize like that's actually a differentiator. You're just genuine and authentic. So many people have no idea how to just be themselves.
Yeah, I think authenticity is real. And I think after the whole COVID thing, it's become more real. Like, people are kind of, it shook people up and they're like, wait, what are we doing here? What are we really trying to accomplish? So I think it's become more true. And then I think your reframe, I agree with, in that, early in your career, like, all right, how do I avoid the potentially scary questions and make sure we're only talking about the things that are going to work? And the minute you're like, hold on, we're on the same side of the table. Does this actually make sense? Things go a lot smoother. I wish I would have figured that out earlier in my career.
Mm-hmm. All right. So you're at Heap and it's doing extremely well. And then they ask you to move into a sales leadership role. And just like you said, and even at Square, you were exposed to, oh my God, there's commission plans, there's enablement, there's territory planning, there's all this different types of stuff. When you first moved into a leadership role, was that challenging? Were you a natural at it? Were you like, oh man, like I've already sold this product, so I know how to, like, what was that step into leadership like for you?
Yes, there's a couple things to think about here. The first thing is the CEO of Heap was a first-time founder. I give him a ton of credit. I think he did a lot of things really right. While at the time I might have disagreed with a lot of things or challenged him or whatever it may be, but they had a cultural value that was like, invest on slope over y-intercept. Basically, get people early in their career that they want to bet on. And he took that to heart, right? Like, at every opportunity, he kept giving me more and more chances to learn and opportunities to grow, et cetera. But immediately stepping in, and you've been super early stage too, right? Like, I think what do sellers need in the really early stage? They need help with deals, right? They need help with deals. And I think because I had already sold a bunch of the early deals, I was immediately valuable, right? So new reps are like, all right, you're coming under the call, play SC role, play manager role, whatever the thing is. But I think in the early days, especially sub 10 reps, deals look different. You know this, right? But deals look different. It's not a cookie cutter process yet as much as you want it to be. And your job is just be super helpful. I think that level one, fine. Like, I did that well. Everyone was happy where everyone's making money. The second step is like, okay, we're starting to build the structure. All right, how do I make sure marketing's doing what we need? How do we make sure product's hearing the feedback? How do we make sure that we're getting the right resources we need? I even think that part was okay. I think where I started to hit some initial walls were like, whoa, okay, I've never really thought deeply and owned a forecast. How do you do that thing really well? Or I've never thought about a comp plan on what we should be incentivizing aside from a handful that I've seen. Or I've never thought about what's the right way to structure a territory or how should we approach our rules of engagement. Now, none of that stuff is rocket science. Like you see all this stuff and you've been exposed to all of it, so you know, but none of it's that hard until you've done it a couple times. So I think where I got lucky is I was never a person to sit there and be like, look, I know all the answers. I was just saying, here's how I would approach it. I'd like to get some eyes on this, whether it's someone from the board, an advisor, whatever that may be. And we were really lucky to invest in some of those advisors. Mm-hmm. So when I first got pushed in or brought into the VP of sales role, I said like, hey, I know how to sell this product. The team respects me. We have good culture. We're doing the right things. We're growing, but like, I'm going to hit a wall. And they said, hey, we're going to go interview a bunch of advisors. You're going to have someone that works with you a couple of days a week. And that was magic. So there was a guy named Jim Hairball that was the CRO at Box. And he used to basically be like a one-on-one coach for me. And then I think he'd go back and tell the founders everything that was working or not working, but it was a good thing we had going. And he just allowed me to see around corners, right? So he's like, hey, Todd, you're thinking about this thing around comp or this rules of engagement, but it's going to break when you get this. And I'm like, yeah, no shit. But there was no way for me to learn that, right? Like he had gone through all of those mistakes before. So I think I got really fortunate in, and I'm a big fan of that model in general, Alex, where you have like bet on the up and comer that knows the product inside and out, has respect to the team, and partner them with people that can help them see around corners. Because I think people mystify a lot of this sales leadership stuff. None of it's rocket science. Like you can learn all of this stuff, but until you've seen it a few times, it's tricky. So I think the reason why they kept betting on me is just because I was super honest about capabilities and really low ego and open to getting to the right answers, regardless of where it was coming from.
Mm. Yeah, it's almost like they invested in you, and whether it's your company choosing to invest in you or you choosing to invest in yourself, like you need to find mentors. And I love what you said is like, I'm not the guy who knew all the answers, because there's no way for you to know all the answers because you've never actually done that before. I guess I'm curious. It's like, that initially when there's the move into a leadership role, especially when you're sales rep, there's that need to super rep it. Right. Yeah. And then after super repping it for a second, you get to that point, you're like, okay, we actually do need some structure and some processes here. And then you get to that, okay, now we can move into that higher level strategic planning stuff. When it came to developing culture, culture is such an important thing. I mean, I think it's only getting more and more important, and it's a black box that many leaders have no freaking idea how to actually do it. I guess I'm curious from your end, when it comes to developing the culture of your sales team, did you have any specific things that you were doing, or were you just a good guy and you brought the energy? Like, how do you actually develop a powerful culture in your sales team?
I think a lot about this, Alex, and I think people think they can say, hey, let's have a team motto, or, we start out at the team meeting the same way, or look at our Slack channel. That's not culture. Like, it helps. But in my opinion, what we had from the very early days, there was a handful of us that were like building the initial sales team. I mentioned Becca. There was another gentleman named Shay who's still there today. I think there was just some things that we did from day one that had really, really high expectations around. Like, for instance, you're always going to be extremely prepared to a meeting. You're always going to be on time. You're always going to share the learnings. You're always going to say what you can do better or differently on that call, or what we can learn from. And I think from day one, we started this culture of really high expectations, but also comfort and almost leaning into when mistakes were happening and being comfortable sharing them, to the fact that, hey, we're going to try a new pitch. We're pitching a new product. We're trying something new. A lot of it's not going to work, but what we do know is we're going to be really well prepared. We're going to learn quickly from that. I think as reps 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 start to see that, they start to mimic a lot of that behavior. So I think a lot more of it was unintentional, but it was due to getting a handful of people early on that were like very much aligned on the non-negotiables.
Mm. Yeah, I relate that to when I was at Outreach and we were building out the different sales teams. There was like two key mottos that we always had. It was like number one is you're not a sales rep, you're a sales professional. So like master your craft. Great sales professional represents a great product. A great sales process represents a great customer success and onboarding experience. So like become great at your craft. The second one, which I think is unique, and I love your perspective on if this is something that you bring in to your teams, or whether it be to Champify or at Heap, this being a purpose. Like, why the fuck are you doing what you're doing? Like, why are we working so hard? Why do we choose to work long hours and wake up early and think about this stuff all the time? Like, is that like something you think about often or bring to your team?
I think explicitly no, but I think in the interview process, in the first couple weeks of getting to know new hires, you do figure out what people want. And most of the people join a high growth startup to usually make less money and work way more because they're trying to accelerate something, right? They're either like, hey, I might be able to hit this comp plan at the right time to have an outsized earnings that's going to set me up to go start my business. Or I'm going to be able to get promoted way faster here because I'm really trying to get to leadership. So I think most people had that purpose or their individual why. I don't think we were great at explicitly like pulling that out or taking that away. I think that was part one. And then I think part two is most of the people, and I've only done this a couple of times, that join these early stage companies are really competitive and usually fighting for a handful of different markets. So I think it's a combination of like personal motivation and like, hey, we're in a dogfight. A bunch of other people just got funding. We're fighting for this same market. I love this, right? I still weirdly like the losses a lot because it motivates the shit out of me, right? But I think it's like unintentionally the purpose that was a little bit more self-centered, not in a negative way. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, just like most of the people were ex-athletes or musicians or whatever it was that were kind of leaning toward more competitive.
Mm. That purpose was almost just at its core essence simple. It's like compete, dog.
That's what I think. I don't know. I think there's a reason why a lot of ex-athletes get into this. It's just the same form of, hey, at the end of the day, we're competing for something. We have a game, aka a deal. You're going to win or lose. You're going to learn from it and get better. You're going to win from it and make the next one easier. Momentum rolls. So I don't think it's any surprise why a lot of people with similar backgrounds get into this.
Mm-hmm. Well, so after you'd been, a sales manager for a while, then you moved into the VP of sales role. And, that's obviously where you really start to lead a lot more strategy. You're not just on the front lines as much. You're having to really, there's just a lot more corners that you got to turn, like you said earlier. Mm-hmm. I guess I kind of want to like ask a unique question. This mental health. Mental health is something that I think a lot of organizations are struggling with, and especially over COVID, this just became a really hot topic for people. And for many organizations, they just try to check the box of it and be like, hey, you take Friday afternoon off, or we do happy hours, or here's a book or something that you could read about what mental health really is. But if you actually knew how to do it, I guess for yourself, like, not necessarily even for your team of how do you support their mental health, but your own, because like, just going into a bigger and bigger role, like that's a lot. And that's a lot more pressure. And especially at a fast growing company like a Heap, it's like, oh man, now I have more responsibility. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think I was naive to even be like, oh, I'm getting ready for a board meeting, 26 years. Like I didn't even realize some of it, I think. But like there was a lot of stress, undoubtedly true. And whether you realize it or not, it's there. I don't know. Me personally, the way I approach this is, every time I know when I'm not working out and eating right, I feel like shit, work, personal, everything, right? And it took me a little while to figure out that all goes together. Even now, like if I get hurt in the gym and I can't work out for 2 weeks, I notice everything else is worse, So for me, it's just like taking care of myself is non-negotiable. Like I work out every, 5 days a week, never miss because I feel way better. Don't drink as much because I know that a day or two after I'm going to feel way more down. Right. So like, I think it took a little while to figure some of that stuff out. Or the kind of overachiever in me in the beginning is like, no, I don't need to sleep. I can work through this. Like you figure this out. You quickly realize, and I about earlier that like, no, it's actually counterintuitive. You know what I mean? Like you have to take care of yourself. You have to do those things. You actually need some time off. For me, luckily, I think it was athlete background, so I kind of never have gotten away from working out too much, but it keeps me sane.
Mm-hmm. It's like the way that I view it, it's like high achievers just have this mentality of like, let me go, let me work harder. Let me just, oh, I got to take another meeting. Sure. Oh, I got to prep for this thing. Throw it on my back. Oh, we got to prep for, hiring this person. It's just like more and more. It's almost like a badge of honor. It's like, man, oh, you need me to work harder? You got it, brother. Like that's where I shine right there. And a lot of people, it catches up to them. Like
100%.
eventually they're like, oh, and then they collapse. And that's when it starts lashing out. It's like, yeah. Have you ever dealt with anything like that? Or have you just mostly been pretty even keeled and you've been able to just like, hey, I work out and I eat right and I don't drink too much?
No,
like,
I don't think, I never had like a huge, you see like Chris Orlow or even like Scott Lee, they talk about things where like I had an incident, I had a panic attack or I had something in my life. Like I haven't had that. I would notice it in my personal relationship. So, cause I've always been like a pretty calm, fun to be around type of person. And then you catch yourself after a long sprint of a couple weeks of working a certain way. And you're with friends or you're with your significant other and you're literally not there because you're thinking about something else. And I think it took me, so there wasn't some big incident, but I did start to realize like, hold on, this isn't even me. Like I have to start taking better care of myself and finding a way to have division here because that's not the person I want to be around. That was me, right? Now, it wasn't some big crazy event, but I did start to notice that. I think I also got lucky where at some point, I'd never done therapy or anything like that when we were at Heap, but we had an exec coach and all the execs got certain, an exec coach. I don't know what they're paying. It's probably not cheap, but it was awesome. And I realized we'd have an hour meeting and I was like, I just talked the whole entire time. This lady didn't say one thing to me. And I was like, I think that's kind of the point.
Man,
right?
I got a lot to get off my chest.
Exactly. And it was kind of like, okay, that was when I started to be like, oh, I understand why people like this therapy thing, or I understand the benefit of being able to vent about some of this. And she really helped guide me in the right direction around, hey, here's how you need to be taking care of yourself. No, this is how you have to delegate, and really started to push me to make some of the things that I was kind of unconsciously going down a probably bad path to try to get in front of. So luckily I didn't have kind of that crazy moment, but I get why people have that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, after you were the VP of sales, you officially chose to take the jump and the leap. And what I really respect about your journey is that everybody has their own path. Some people choose to step into entrepreneurial route, right away. Some people choose to wait until they've had, 15 to 20 years of experience, got their MBA, and then take the jump. But you took, it's like, if you look at your background, it's like, oh, one thing did truly lead to the next. So it's like after VP sales, like, hey, this guy is for the most part credible when it comes to leading a company specifically that focuses on helping people sell more effectively or retain their customers. How did you eventually decide, all right, I'm ready to freaking do this? Like, let's go for this. And do you ever regret it?
I think there's some days where, well, it's really interesting. I'll be super honest here. So here's how it went for me. I did a little over 6 years at Heap. We had brought in a professional CEO. I loved working for him. I learned a ton from him. I felt like I was hitting the wall of my learnings. Right. And I realized two things, like, okay, go back to that earning and learning. Earning part was great. The learning part, I was like, okay, I'm starting to hit some of the walls and I'm starting to get frustrated because I feel like I banged my head against the wall trying to fix a lot of these same problems that I think maybe aren't fixable based on bigger market trends, et cetera. And I started to find myself getting a little salty. I was like, all right, it's probably time to go. So that was the first thing, realizing why did I think was the right time to step away. I took 3 months off, Alex, 3 completely months off, didn't open my computer, didn't log into LinkedIn, didn't do anything. And it was awesome. I met my wife I went to Peru on a surf trip by myself, got really good at Spanish. I met my now wife. But I think that was awesome. I'd heard a podcast at some point, like probably when I was working way too much at Heap, of someone saying how they take a sabbatical every 7 years instead of kind of having the normal retirement age. And that resonated with me. I wish I had more courage at the time to do longer than 3 months, but 3 months was enough. Like after a couple of weeks, you're like, oh, this is what my shoulders are supposed to feel like. Or, oh, okay, that's how you're supposed to sleep. You know what I mean? It takes a while to get out of that. So I'm really happy I did that. It allowed me to step back. And I remember just writing like, what do I actually want? What is the next thing, right? Because I did know that I did not want to go down that CRO path, but I think I was in a situation that likely you were in, a lot of other people where you're like, I didn't come from money, and now I can go take this job that it's really not that bad. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, it's high stress, but you make a lot of money. Is that the thing I want to be doing? So I started to think about I also knew I wanted to start a business, but I didn't have anything that I was like, all right, this is it, right? Like now is the exact time to do it. So I was lucky enough to get a call from someone that ran a venture firm. They said, hey, why don't you come here? You clearly know what you're doing on early stage. We invest in early stage companies, help them figure out go to market. And for me, I was like, hey, I'm down to do this, but it's going to be for a fixed amount of time, right? I don't know if it's 12 months or 18 months, but I'm not going to be doing this for a long time. I don't really want to be in venture. And if something changes, I'll be open to it. But that was my kind of step into it. And my logic here, Alex, was I can learn about venture from the other side. I can see a bunch of early stage companies. And one of two things are going to happen. I'm either going to go start a company after this, or I'm going to jump into one of these companies because I realized after some time away, I actually really like that thing. Right. So after about 6 months, I started to realize like my skill set are more geared, I think, to a founder than to like the best CROs of the world. Like I'm like pretty good at that sales leadership, but I'm like also pretty good at 5 other things. And I think that combination is good for a founder.
Would you expand a little bit on that? I'm curious when you say, because I think that's a common path. If you're like, oh, do I just continue to move up this sales
Right.
leadership world, or actually this founder is more my identity? What makes
so
you?
What I told you from the beginning, I'm not the best salesperson. I don't even think I'm the best sales leader. I think there's people that are way better at it, and I've been around some of them, and it's like kind of magical to see. What I do think I'm good at is like early days of Heap, I was like the nerdy AE that's like part sales engineer, part product marketer, right? Like that type of skill set I think is really good for a founder. And then if you look at it building early teams, I think that's the most valuable thing for a founder, right? So if you look at building teams and motivating and setting up comp structures and positioning and competitive landscape, a lot of that's really good skill sets for an early stage founder. Actually not that good to be a middle stage CRO or middle stage head of sales. Some of it is, right? So I just started to see that A, the things I like, and B, the things I'm uniquely good at tends to gravitate more towards starting something.
So you were in there for 6 months. You were supporting early stage companies, and then you essentially got the idea to start Champify. And was it like, oh man, this is a problem that I know we can solve, or I love selling to salespeople and I'm in the sales role, and so that made sense. It's like, how did you actually decide that Champify was the company specifically that you wanted to start?
I was actually really nervous about going to sell to salespeople. You were at Outreach for a long time. I remember calling a friend of mine who's VP of sales at Gong, and I said, you had come from some technical products, sold HR products. What's it like selling to salespeople? There's a part of me that's excited. There's a part of me that's like, I don't think I'm going to like this. I'd sold to technical product and eng people, right? He kind of talked me into it. He's like, hey, I think you'd be really good at it because you're instantly credible, and I am enjoying it. But what happened was we had built kind of a bad version of Champify internally at Heap, and we just saw the success it had. And then starting to look at the space, it was like, all right, this is going to become a thing. Like whether Champify goes and does this or not, there's going to be other companies going after it. And I think it's the entry point into a lot of where this is going. What ultimately gave me the confidence, 2 things, and you kind of hit on one of them. The first thing is I'd encourage any founders that are thinking about starting a company or just flirting with the idea, check out Unusual Ventures. Like that's where I work. They have this thing called a field guide, which really helps you go through like the idea maze and, hey, is there something here? And how do you validate an idea? And how do you really figure out if there's a there? But basically, one of the really smart reps at Heap that was working in my organization was having a lot of success running what is now Champify, right? And when I was at Unusual, he was like, hey, I really think that should be a company. I'm thinking about turning that into something. And he was like, you're the right person to come do this with me. And at first I kind of shook it off. And then I said, hey, let's just go have 30 conversations as if me and you were doing this together. And outside of our networks, A, can we book meetings? B, how does the message resonate? And when we did that, there was a lot of, yeah, this is a real problem. A lot of what you're saying that's happening in the market is true. Like if you could build this thing, yeah, there's money to be invested here. And I got a sense of what that feels like another plug if people are in this early stage thing is check out the book called The Mom Test. I think it teaches you how to ask and answer the right questions so you're not getting bullshit feedback. The idea is like, hey, are you asking your mom, is this pretty or not? Of course, she's going to say yes. But in doing that, I was like, wow, there's companies that Unusual Ventures has led these massive seed rounds for, where an intro conversation for Champify, which wasn't even a thing at the time, feels way easier, more urgency, more pull, more willingness to pay. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm sitting here thinking about a bunch of other ideas I could potentially start, from vertical SaaS companies to all different kinds of things. But I was like, this is, when you hear like founder market fit, something I think, A, I immediately have some unique value. B, I think I have a good idea on where the puck is going. So it kind of made sense that like, hey, this is the thing. Now there's a lot I've learned about why this arena or category is really challenging too. But to answer your other question, I don't regret it, because like I'm learning a ton. We're doing well as a company. I have a really smart, badass team. The market's changing every day, so it feels like a puzzle of things we're always trying to figure out. But that was ultimately the story of how we got there. And just the last wrinkle was, both of us were relatively non-technical, and I went to the kind of 10 smartest engineers I knew, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about this. A, do you want to invest? B, if I'm going to go and put all my eggs in this basket, I need a really good CTO. Who do you know? And then I started kind of having a bunch of conversations that led us to our current CTO, Dan. Who's been awesome.
So I love, one of the things that I really like about Champify is not only are you selling a product that's really effective, and I'd love actually for you to kind of share a little bit, just high level in terms of what does Champify do, but I also love how you talk about how to implement like the actual structure of it. And specifically what I mean is like, so many people think, hey, if I purchase a sales technology, problem solved, right? So many people thought that outreach. Okay, if I buy outreach, cool. Now we are building pipeline. It's like, well, like that's a step in the right direction, but there's a lot more that actually goes into it. But you guys really talk about, hey, here's a powerful technology that you can use, but also we really dig deep into how do you build an outbound culture. And so I'd actually love just for you to kind of talk a little bit about, not just what does Champify do, but specifically how does one who steps into a founder or CEO role, especially as you're not just getting a whole bunch of inbound, which, you won the lottery if that's the case of what you're getting. How do you actually go about building a powerful outbound culture or team?
Yeah, so it's funny, when we were just getting going, I actually talked to your boy Andy Mooboy. I wanted to say, hey, tell me about some of this stuff the early days of Champify, because I'm sure there's a lot of similarities. Right? People think, oh, I buy outreach, I magically am going to get tons of inbound meetings coming in when I'm sleeping. And the reality is adoption for any category of tools, I think, is extremely important. I think changing sales behavior at scale is very challenging, right? And we're the first to tell people in sales calls, look, if you just think you're going to turn this thing on and it's magically going to work, do not pay us, right? Like you have to train the teams, you have to get frontline managers bought in, you got to get this into their existing workflows, you got to show them what great looks like anything else. Right. So we spend a lot of time on that. And I think as our product gets more and more complex, I think that becomes even more important. I'd love for the product to just work out of the box and everyone starts getting meetings and good outcomes. But changing behavior is hard, even as the best tech in the world gets implemented. So the second part of your question is, how do you go and build a good outbound culture? And I think the reality is, again, people are looking for some novel piece of tech as a silver bullet or some magic answer. And the reality is there's not one. And if you have some type of channel or strategy that's working, other people are going to copy soon and it's not going to last, right? So I think the way people build successful outbound motion and culture starts with a commitment from founders, leadership, CFO, investment, whatever dollars are going into why are we doing this? How do you have the right expectations? Right? So do people, A, know what they're supposed to do every single day? Do they know what a good day at work looks like? Do they know what great looks like when it's making a cold call, sending an intro email, whatever that may be? The cadence, this is where, going from, you talked about those different levels of super rep to kind of first manager to strategic thinking. A lot of that gets lost. People think they have an operating cadence, but do you know what you're trying to measure? Do you have the right rules of engagement? Do you have the right meeting structure to hold people accountable? Are you giving them the right resources? You need ops support and enablement support. That's one thing I definitely made mistakes on at Heap, undervalued that. I thought, oh, you hire the smart rep, they listen to a couple gong calls, they kind of figure it out. Completely wrong, right? So like investing in enablement, making sure that whether it's every week or every other week, there's some type of enablement happening. Like you said, we're not sales reps, we're sales professionals, right? And that's important to get people thinking in that way. And then the last thing is just the right type of team DNA that you build. I think it's a lot easier to hire people with the outbound motion than it is to teach people that have been fed inbound leads to how to hunt. Can you do it? Yes. I think it's harder. And I think the idea is, how do you build the right team with the right traits and personas and experiences for the right type of culture you want to build? But all those things took me, 90 seconds to say? Like, that's hard. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's really hard. And it requires Alex 4 years ago in the meeting every day saying the same exact message 100 times. When you're walking into your team meeting once a week and you're like, damn, I know they're sick of me saying this, but this is what it's required. Like, it's not easy. And I think that people are just better leaning into that than others.
You know, I've heard you say in the past two things that I just want to comment on that. The first one is, I believe you said you had an old CEO who came in and his number one thing that he cared about was pipe gen. Number one thing. And so he was actually getting into the weeds when he was looking literally at sales reps, KPIs in terms of prospecting as the CEO, the one who was supposed to lead the vision, the one who's supposed to make sure the company doesn't run out of money, the one who's supposed to be hiring all the executives, looking at KPIs. And if you want to talk about that number one point you made of like how to build an outbound culture, it's commitment. It starts at the CEO right there. So I love that. And the second thing that I've heard you say in the past is the rigor that you actually have around your one-on-ones. And this was kind of in that bucket around your operating cadence, right? It's like, hey, each week, you had a little bit of a different type of one-on-one with each rep. So it wasn't monotonous. All right, we're talking about our deals in our pipeline again for the 80th time this month. It's like, I love actually just kind of double click into that, and then I'll kind of finish this off here in the pod.
I think that, you could look at that and say, is this CEO focused on the right things? Right. But really what he was doing, it wasn't like, oh, is Alex sending a better message or does Todd have the right activity? What he was showing to the company is that PG is the lifeblood of the company. Right. And he was putting his money in the form of his time and attention where his mouth was. Right. And if you listen to, like, I just had Doug May, who runs all of enablement at Harness, who works with Carlos Delatorre, the CRO. They say they don't even have their weekly sales meeting is PG meeting. And what that's doing is telling the whole company, like, no, this is the thing, because we know if we're in enough quality opportunities, the other stuff's going to figure itself out. Don't get me wrong. They're looking at it. They're worried about conversion rate. They're looking at all of that, but it shows the message. And then operating like another person that comes to mind, I mentioned this individual's name, but Justin Geller at Gong, he's like, look, you have to take everything that you're doing and insert PG into it, right? So one-on-ones, people know that they're going to be talking about it. The right dashboards they're talking about. It's built in the promotion plans. It sounds like a lot, but that's what's required to get this thing to hum, right? And the reality is it is a lot, So I think, again, people are looking for a silver bullet, and you can just see in our 15-minute conversation here talking about there's a lot that goes into it. The reality is the best leaders are just really good at being super consistent, having high standards and holding people accountable, and then attracting the best talent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll have to link the article on the Champify website that speaks a little bit to that, that rigor around there. But I remember one thing that you talked about. It's like, hey, 1 week I would, talk about current deals. And the next week I was talking about, how is the pipeline gen going? And the next week I was talking about skill development. And then we just go on repeat right there. And it just created this feeling of like, oh, you're really hitting on all the key things that I'm looking for, specifically around that skill development, right? So many sales professionals are just like, yo, dog, just teach me how to be more effective. And it's something that's so overlooked, or that most sales leaders think, oh, that's enablement's job. It's like, no.
Especially an early company, no, hard no. And then I think when you don't have that type of rigor, Alex, and you're aware of this, you just get in deal gossip. Okay, let's talk about the latest deal. What did we hear? Right? That's the way it'll go. And you're never going to actually move the organization forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you think you're doing your job just by updating Salesforce, and that's just that ain't it. So I wanna finish with this, and it's my final question. But before I ask that final question, Todd, I just want to acknowledge you, man. Like, you're a wealth of information, and you speak, very well, but you speak from a place of not like saying, "Hey, here's the answers." It's more like, here is just what my journey has been. And you've obviously been very successful within your journey. There's a deep level of genuineness and authenticity with how you share. And there's no surprise that Champify has been succeeding the way that it has. So first off, just thanks for showing up and being you.
Appreciate it.
My last question for you is this. The show is obviously called the Rising Leader Podcast. So my question is, what do you view as the rising leader?
I could take that two ways. I think the first thing is, when you and I were coming up, we're probably around the same age. When you or I were coming up, it was like almost this fear-based mentality of sales leadership, right? And I think especially the younger town and just in today's world, like that doesn't work. I don't get me wrong. I'm the most strict when it comes to expectations and accountability, but not in a fear-first type of operating model, right? Or leadership style. So the first thing that comes to mind is just like, if I look at some of the best leaders I see, they're super empathetic. They're in the boat with people. They're not pretending to have all the answers. They're not afraid to get outside opinions. So that's what I see as the kind of rising leader. The second way I kind of see this, and that's why I really like the message you're putting out there and the work you're doing, is getting people to just really think about like, okay, how does this tie to my purpose? What is the thing I actually want? Because you and I are both aware, like, you can get into this tech thing, you start making a little bit more money. Holy shit, you just woke up and you used to do this for 15 years. Like, is that the thing you really wanted? So I look at it both ways. There's a rising leader in everyone that's the first SDR starting their first job. And I think it's being more intentional about what they want. And then on the true, definitional word of leader, what is that type of leader that I think is going to build the best organizations over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Mm-hmm. Well said, and that's a wonderful cherry on top for this conversation. So, Todd, I appreciate it, man. If people want to get a hold of you, what is the best way to do so?
LinkedIn's best. My name's Todd Busler, exactly how it sounds. I write on there pretty consistently about a lot of the same stuff we're talking about here today. I appreciate you having me on, Alex.
Hell yeah. Well, I appreciate everybody, too, for hopping on here and listening to this podcast. And I guarantee if you are listening to this, you know somebody who needs to listen to the awesome wisdom coming from Todd. So make sure to share it with them and subscribe to the show. So with that, Todd, thanks for being on, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Rising Leader Podcast. Make sure you hit that follow button so you get notified every time a new episode releases. If you know someone who wants to take their lives and their career to the next level, send them this episode so we can all rise together. For more information, check out alluviance.co. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, keep letting it flow.